gang, it is Wednesday. It is a brisk day here in South Carolina, but nonetheless a great week. Welcome to Dennis in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live, and tonight it is over one of my favorite varietals, a beautiful Brunello di Montalcino, and that has me pretty pumped up. I was told that I wasn't allowed to do the port wine because my wife watched last week's show and she said, I could tell you were getting pretty drunk. So no more Porto for Jeffrey. So anyway, want to thank you all for being here. As you know, and as I mentioned, we're your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. I am with my besties, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. As always, you know us all as educators, you know us all as practice owners, and we all have our own way of sharing information. So we're going to do that with you because you know what our job is?
It's to bring all of you
in the know.
Oh, guys, I am so excited about our guest tonight. Even though I have never met him, I just feel like there's just from the little conversation that we had with him before, I feel like there are just so many commonalities and so many common experiences. So for all of you watching, we have an incredible dentist, comedian, author, philanthropist, and we could keep adding to the list, but Dr. Jeffrey Gurian is going to be spending some time with us, and just a few stories that we've had the chance to share in the past few moments, and just through some emails. I could not be more excited because all of us in dentistry need humor, that's for sure. But he brings so much to the table clinically and in his past teaching experiences. And so I know you all are going to be really excited. And we're going to have a lot of fun chatting with him. We got to tell a few jokes even just prior to us getting started.
Really excited to announce that California is dropping their mask mandate in all buildings as of April 1st. So unless you're providing active treatment care, so that means doctor's offices, government buildings, schools, wherever masks have currently been required in that state. I don't know all the specifics because I don't live there, but they are going to move forward with dropping the mask mandate. So I think that continues to be a positive sign of healing that, as communities and groups were moving on and moving forward with being back in proximity with each other. So that's exciting. It has been kind of funny, though, how patients have forgotten that we actually have always worn masks, or at least as long as I've been practicing. I do remember my orthodontist who never wore a mask or gloves, but, I certainly can remember that time. But I've always worn a mask in practicing for the last 15, 16 years now. But it's funny how aware the public is about mask wearing, and they seem kind of, oh, you wear a mask for dental treatment? So anyway, you can continue, and California will continue to support mask wearing for treatment while we're treating patients. So exciting news, I think, for folks who live in the state of California. Colorado is the newest state to be adding the dental health aid therapist to their portfolio of providers. As of March 1st, DHATs will be allowed to practice in the state. And they're also looking to add an educational program for dental health aid therapists to become trained to provide that level of care in their state. They are the 13th state now that are allowing a mid-level provider to be able to provide care to patients in that legally within their state parameters. Interestingly, though, only 4 states currently have educational programs for dental health aid therapists. So Colorado sees an opportunity and a necessity, frankly, to provide educational opportunities for those who are seeking the dental health aid therapist level of training. So we'll continue to watch that. There's been mixed reviews, I think, overall about the variety of dental health aid therapists we've seen both nationally and internationally. There are some areas in which it has proven to be successful and some areas where it has not. So I think the jury is still out on what this will serve in our dental or hierarchy of licensed providers and where the needs will be able to be met with these mid-level providers. So we'll continue to watch that. The CDT code, you may have heard our great friend Greg Grobmeyer come online last week to talk about after his meeting with the ADA, looking at the enhanced CDT code book. We brought this to your attention many months ago because the comment period has been made available for quite some time. For those of you who aren't familiar with the changes, the ADA Code Committee is looking at an opportunity to do a pretty fundamental change in the CDT code workbook by starting to add modifiers to those codes. So you would still use the majority of the same codes that you know, let's say for a crown, for instance, but you might have to provide a modifier code, which would indicate what material you chose, may indicate the diagnostic criteria for why a crown was indicated for this particular tooth. So there's a lot of nuances in this enhanced code. It certainly is starting to look a lot more like the ICD code book and medical coding in general. The deadline for your comment period will be the end of March. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to take a peek, or you felt very passionate about it, but haven't taken that last moment to voice your opinion, I can tell you emphatically, the ADA is listening very intently to all comments about moving forward with this particular project and what it should look like to be successful. They have extended the deadline for when this might actually become a reality, giving more time to strategically figure out what it will look like for change. But just know the open comment period for this first phase will end at the end of March. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me or our friend Greg Grobmeyer. He is pretty active on our site as well, and the chief editor of Coding with Confidence, coming out of Dr. Blair's organization in Charlotte. A lot of attention has been drawn over the last couple of weeks, particularly on social media and news outlets, about a particular device, the AGA device, which was a mandibular advancement device. I think originating, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but originating out of the Las Vegas Institute, or LVI, as many of us refer to them, for treating TMJ disorders and occlusion issues. But more recently has gained some unhappy notoriety when a few patients had some pretty untoward outcomes with treatment. Now, the FDA has decided to take a look at these particular devices being suggested and trained out of sort of the out branches of the LVI group and instructors who are associated with that group. So if you happen to be a trained LVI doctor utilizing some of these techniques, you may want to keep a close pulse on the news coming out of that. The FDA is going to look pretty quickly, I think, at this particular device, as it is not an approved device out of their organization currently, to make decisions on whether or not this will be allowed to stay a medical device moving forward for doctors to treat. And lastly, on a lighter note, because I rarely end with happy news, and this isn't even really happy, frankly, but right before I came on tonight, the goofiest news blip came across my phone. And I thought, commonly we've brought really important news topics to you all. Remember the lady that was farting in a jar and making millions of dollars off of that? For those of you who are dentists looking for side gigs, we want to be there for you and we want to support you in those journeys. Well, this is another PSA that I think we should all really address. It's probably the elephant in the room for many of us. A news article just came out of the 6 reasons why you shouldn't poop and use your cell phone. I think many of us could probably identify some of the top ones: hemorrhoids, dirty phones, sitting too long and passing out like the vasovagal complex. I just want to be a reminder, a friendly reminder, encourager, that maybe you consider an alternative time that you can decompress, just you and your phone, catching up on your friends' posts on Instagram and your latest podcast episodes of Dennis in the Know. Maybe not while you poop. And with that, that's the news.
I'm so excited about our guest tonight. People often refer to this gentleman, Dr. Jeffrey Gurian, as a Renaissance man because he's involved in so many things. He's a dentist, he's a lecturer, he's a motivational speaker, but he's also a comedy writer, performer, director, author, producer, radio personality, and not necessarily in that order either. But more importantly, Jeffrey's a former cosmetic dentist and a former clinical professor at N.Y.U, where he was in the Oral Medicine-Oro-Facial Pain Department, a board member of the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy, and he actually lectured on a topic called star therapy, which was used to treat some of the physical symptoms associated with like stress-related illnesses, migraine, headaches, bruxism, a lot of the things that people are dealing with today in a post-COVID world. But aside from being a dentist, he's one of the few doctors with a long-standing career in comedy. He's right now involved in creating 2 new TV shows. He's in pre-production on 2 films that he's written. He's an Amazon best-selling author. He's got 8 books. I believe the last 3 books all have to do with healing. Last one being Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. All really incredible self-help stuff. He has an internet channel with over 500 video interviews that he's done. The name of that is called Comedy Matters TV. And I'm just excited to bring him on. If I read the rest of this bio, we could run out of time. So without further ado, let's bring Dr. Jeffrey Gurian on. And Jeffrey, how you doing? May I call you Jeffrey?
Please do. Yeah, I'm so happy to be on with you guys. Really, this is so fun. I've been watching. Your energy is so great. I wish I knew dentists like that when I was in dental school.
Yeah, well, we try and make it fun. We're just honored to have you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely. But now you're all in different states, I guess. Chad, you're in Texas.
I'm in Texas.
Jeff, you're in North Carolina.
I'm in South. Jennifer's in North.
Jennifer's in North. So I just have to ask. I know you're going to interview me, but how did you guys meet to get together?
Well, it was a long night. There might have been some dollar bills and wine bottles involved. I don't know, but it's a long story. We can't really get into. No, Jennifer and I knew each other through the Academy of General Dentistry, where we were in the same region, so we worked a lot together. Shortly after I got to know Jennifer, I met Chad through a group that we used to teach with. We were both lecturing, and so we met that way. And then during COVID, we just decided, how do we, we talked about this. How do we stay relevant? How do we keep people informed of what's going on? So we said, let's just try to keep dentists in the know. So we formed this little group. We brought Jennifer on to keep everybody abreast of what's going on in organized dentistry, and she quickly became the brains and the beauty of the operation, and it just went on from there. The chemistry was there.
No, it's so great. COVID had, it had its I don't even want to say it had its bright points, but I was able to turn a negative into a positive, like you guys. I was in the hospital with COVID double pneumonia, and the day they declared it a pandemic, March 11th, that's the day that I got sick, March 11th, 2020.
Oh, my God.
As you can tell, I'm a trendsetter. I went right out and got it. I don't want to wait. I got it immediately. The night before, I'm sitting at Gotham Comedy Club, which is one of the biggest comedy clubs in New York City. And I'm sitting with the owner, and they're shooting me for a documentary that they were doing about me. Not the one that you saw, a different film. And a comedian named N.Y.U, who was headlining that night, came to the table. So it was me, Chris Mazzilli, the owner of the club, Michael Yo, and the head of security. All three of us wound up in the hospital.
Oh my
Oh
God.
gosh.
And the owner of the club never got sick. It was amazing. It was amazing. The next day, I started getting sick, and I didn't go to the hospital for 2 weeks because I was praying it wasn't COVID, because I had a heart history, and they were warning people. New York was the epicenter of the virus at the time. They ran out of hospital rooms. They were putting people in the hallway. But after 2 weeks, I couldn't take the pain anymore. It was a nightmare. So I called an ambulance. They came in hazmat suits. And it was my first time that I experienced such kindness. You know, during COVID, when you were sick, you were really alone. You were dealing with everything alone. And this guy took my hand and he said to me, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay." And I can't tell you what that little act of kindness meant when you're that sick. And he was amazed that I could get on the stretcher myself. He said most people needed to be carried. And they brought me to the hospital and they wheeled me into the emergency room, and they put me in a cubicle next to a woman who was screaming, literally screaming with every breath that she took. And, you know, the natural thing is to think like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Because it's such a weird circumstance, right? And in my books, I write about the spiritual concept is, why not me? Whoever promised me that my life is supposed to be perfect and nothing's supposed to happen to me? So it was evolving like a movie. It was crazy. They were going to actually send me home as sick as I was, until a pulmonary specialist came to see me, and he x-rayed my lungs and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, you have COVID double pneumonia. We're going to find a room for you." So they put me in a room. I'm in isolation for 2 days. On the third day, they moved me to a room with 3 other very sick men, and they put me in bed next to a guy from Wuhan, China. I'm like, that can't even happen. My life literally always becomes a Woody Allen movie. I'm in bed. I'm in bed next. I'm laying there next to patient 0.
Yeah.
And this poor guy is choking and coughing in the air with no mask on, and so I don't want to look bad, but I'm complaining to the nurse. I'm like, "Can't you move me?" And she tells me not to worry, and she points to a thin curtain that's hanging between our beds. And I think, how foolish of me to have been concerned. You know, everyone knows if you want to protect yourself from a deadly virus, you hang a thin curtain between you. Yeah? Meanwhile,
was there a bird cage with bats in it in the corner?
Meanwhile, she's wearing a freaking hazmat suit with swim fins and gear. I have a thin curtain to protect me. I'm like, too bad Dr. Fauci didn't know about the thin curtain approach, you know? It was a very weird thing. But, you know, I'll tell you, though, I had to work very hard to stay positive because people were dying all around me. Of the 4 guys, one guy, his oxygen dropped from 93 to 80 within seconds. They had to rush him to the ICU. And I had to really fight to stay in a positive frame of mind because, as you know, when you're in a negative space, your immune system isn't functioning as well. And if you're positive, you can fight things off better. And so nurses would come in one at a time. Only one person was allowed in at a time. And they'd sit with me for a few minutes and they'd give me encouragement. And they announced on the radio that I was in the hospital. I used to be a regular on Sirius XM. And there's a big comedy show called The Bennington Show. And Ron Bennington was kind enough to announce that I was so sick. And I started getting literally hundreds of messages from people. And again, you talk about kindness. I was too sick to answer anybody. But just knowing that so many people were thinking of me, like, I'm a big believer in the power of thought and the power of prayer. And when so many people are focusing their energy on one particular thing, I really believe that it has an effect. And, you know, when I had my heart attack, I had a widowmaker heart attack, and I was back on stage in 5 days, right? And the owner of the club says to me, "What are you, crazy? You just had a heart attack." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot." That's how sick. Comedians are sicker than dentists. Believe me, as sick as dentists may be, comedians take it to another level. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, that's great. That I love the way that you put that in there. But I just want to ask, if you were still practicing dentistry full time and you had a widowmaker, would you have been back in the office practicing dentistry in 5 days, or was it just the spot at the comedy club?
Probably not. It was the spot at the comedy club. When I left the hospital, they said to me, try and act like this never happened. And I'm like, how do I do that? Like, my kids drove me home and I'm walking around my apartment and I'm thinking how close I must have come to dying. My LAD artery was 95% blocked. And I never had a problem in my life. It came out of nowhere. So
Wow.
it's an insane story how it happened. But I was joking with the surgeon on the operating table because I wasn't completely asleep and I felt them unplugging my heart. And I said to the guy, I feel you in my heart, not in a romantic way, but I feel you in my heart. And he said to me, no one has ever joked with me during surgery. No patient has ever joked with me. And he came to my room like around 5 o'clock and he hugged me. He said, I want to tell you, you're a miracle. And I'm like, no, you're the miracle. You're the guy who figured out how to save me, you know? And again, it was like, I had to fight to stay positive because it's not real when you're going through something like that. It's a very bizarre thing. And I'm like, but this is my path. You know, in my books, I talk about everybody has a path in life. And sometimes things happen that you would rather not happen. And you have to process it. You can't only believe in certain principles when it feels like your life is going perfectly. It's when it feels like nothing is going right. That's when those principles are important. So I had to remind myself, for whatever reason, this is my path. I have to go through this. And whatever happens is not up to me. I have to trust the people around me to take care of me. And that gave me a sense of calmness, because it's very important to try to stay calm in a situation like that. It's not easy, believe me, it's not easy. Like, you know, but I had to practice what I preach. If I write about that, you know, you have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk.
So,
you know?
Jeffrey, I love, first of all, I love the insights you have towards, you know, towards happiness and self-help. And I want to hear, and I know everyone out there wants to hear about your books, but I think everyone also wants to hear about your path to get to the point where you were ready to author books. Tell us about dental school. Tell us about how a dental school student says, well, you know what? I think I want to be a comedian. And then what happens during that process? Just maybe give us an overview of your journey that got you to this point.
No, absolutely. And I love telling the story. And I don't get to tell it often because I'm not often speaking to cool dentists. So when I was 12 years old, I decided I wanted to be a dentist, and I was already writing comedy. And I wanted to be a doctor of some kind. And I must have been a weird kid because most 12-year-old kids don't choose what they want to do and stick with it for their whole life. But I wanted to be a doctor, but I was a very sensitive child. And like, I'm an empath, which is why I'm able to do energy work and stuff. And it's a very difficult way to grow up, to be overly sensitive. And I had to learn to own my sensitivity as a strength, you know. And in our society, when I treat stress-related illness, most of the patients are women. Women know how to feel their feelings. It comes naturally to them. Men are taught, like, don't feel your feelings, try and block your feelings, which is really not a healthy thing at all. I had no choice. I overfelt my feelings. If I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. So I wanted to be a doctor, but I knew I couldn't handle life and death situations. And I was wearing braces. And I'm like, this is what I'll do. I'll make people look beautiful. I'll be an orthodontist. And I was already writing comedy. So when it was time for me to apply for dental school, I don't know. I have real bad ADHD. I'm always confused. I choose things by the name. So I got into Buffalo. Buffalo was too cold. I got into Maryland. Maryland was too old. And I got into Temple, and I thought, well, I'm Jewish, so I'll go to Temple. It just made sense. It felt comfortable. You know what I mean? It felt comfortable. So I was really looking forward to it, and I expected to be welcomed into the profession as anybody would. You know, you expect that other people there would just welcome you in. They'd be so happy that you're joining their profession. But instead, it turns into a 4-year fraternity hazing. And on the very first day of school, the dean addressed all the new students, and it's embedded in my consciousness. I'll never forget what he said. He said, we don't want any free thinkers here. If you want to be a hippie with a guitar, go to dental school in California. That was our greeting. And so from the very first day, they started to pick on me because I looked like I did in this picture here. In New York in those days, people grew mustaches and sideburns, and they were convinced that my hair was too long. My hair was so short, but there were two instructors that took it upon themselves to make my life miserable. One was the head of Crown and Bridge, and he had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, "The South will rise again." And he couldn't get his hair short enough. I think he had someone with a shovel that dug out his hair. And the other guy was the guy who ran the prosthetics department, the two most powerful departments in the school. And they were determined to get me to drop out of school. And I never knew why until recent years, but it's a crazy story. So from my very first day, they started to pick on me. And to the point where when you learn to give anesthetic, you learn on patients. You're giving injections to patients. And my thing was always to develop painless injections. So I'm sitting in the clinic with a patient, and I have the needle in the gingiva already. And the instructor comes by and he hits my elbow like that. He says, "Put it in further." These days, that would be considered assault. But that's the kind of stuff that they used to do to me. So it got to the point where I was banned from school. You look at this picture, you see that's not long hair. It's nowhere near what I have now. And I was not allowed to see patients for 3 weeks. And my advisor called me into the hall one day. He said, "I want you to know you're a disgrace to the profession." Now, I'm 21 years old, and I'm very impressionable, and I'm trying to enter a field that I always wanted to be my whole life. And they're telling me I'm a disgrace to the profession because I have a mustache and sideburns. Meanwhile, the founders of the school, there's pictures all over of guys with mutton chops and long beards and black hats and alpaca coats, right? But I'm a disgrace to the profession. They damaged me in many ways. That lasted a very long time. It went on for the whole 4 years. So when you can't see patients for 3 weeks, it's very hard to finish your requirements. They were trying to keep me out of the clinic long enough that I couldn't graduate, that I couldn't go ahead. My dad came down from Philly. He came down from New York to Philly. They wouldn't even let me work on my own father. They told my father, "Tell your son to get a haircut." And my father said, "Look, he's going to be a doctor. I can't tell him what to do." But in conversation, they found out that my father had served in World War II. And that meant a lot to this guy with the Confederate flag. And he said to me, if you get a haircut, we'll let you back in the clinic. Meanwhile, I'm missing 3 weeks of work. My mother bought me a wig. She bought me a flat wig with a part and mustache wax. And he said to me, "You can have a mustache, but it has to be up in the air." Not that I looked like Salvador Dali going to school. It was ridiculous. I'm wearing a wig. I'm wearing a flat wig and a mustache up in the air and a tie, because a tie shows that you're a doctor. As long as you have a tie, you can do it. So meanwhile, I don't think I had a date the whole time I was there, because no girl would look at a guy with mustaches up in the air with a flat wig. Any girl that would have liked me, I wouldn't have even gone with her, So I had to go back to New York on the weekends to have any kind of a social life. Anyway, the dean put up a sheet all over the school, and I'm going to read you just a little bit of it so you can get a sense of the sickness that was happening at Temple University in those days, right? It says, "To dental students, this is a communication on the subject of hair, which I deem to be of timely importance. The public's current concept of a professional gentleman, especially in the field of health, pictures a clean, neat-shaven, well-dressed person of good manners. A century ago, the concept of that era included beards, mustaches, long sideburns, tobacco chewing, greasy black alpaca coats. Customs change, and it appears the more responsible persons that the current concept of a professional gentleman is a marked improvement over that of a century ago." And then going down, he says, "Our dental students have long had the reputation of being the best mannered, handsomest, and cleanest students on our campus. I'm disturbed that we may be losing that reputation." So he pasted these all over the school, and they were that strict. Jeff, you would have been thrown out. You would have been tortured. You could never have a goatee. You know, your glasses.
Well, there'd have been a lot of reasons I'd have been thrown out.
Chad, your glasses were too hip for Temple University. So okay, so
I'm too girl.
There was only there was only one woman in my class.
Yeah.
One woman, and she wound up marrying one of the instructors. There was no diversity. There was no diversity.
Which was okay.
Well, I guess it was okay for her.
Yeah.
But when I graduated, as they handed me my diploma, they said, "Gurian, get a haircut." I left Philadelphia with my girlfriend, who came to live with me and who became my wife, and I never looked back. I vowed that I would never go to Philadelphia again. I would never have anything to do with the school, and I was going to become as successful as I could be. So within a few years, I bought a practice. I turned it into a cosmetic practice. I was one of the earliest practitioners of bonding, of cosmetic dentistry. And I used to represent. I was a consultant to companies, and I lectured in Hawaii and California about cosmetic dentistry. I put teeth back together again before anybody did. And I was very into bonding. That was my specialty. And so just before the pandemic, I get an email one day from Temple University. The dean would like to come to New York to meet with you. So I'm like, what's that about, right? So I assumed that he wanted to come to meet with me to ask me for a donation. That was my interpretation, because I never had anything to do with the school in all these years. But I had gotten a lot of press. All the TV shows in New York did stories about me. The New York Times did a cover story about me. And so some people had heard about me. So what I write about is confronting your uncomfortability, standing up to fear. Never let fear stand in your way. I was going to ignore the email, but I decided, no, I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to tell him how I was tortured in dental school unnecessarily and how it affected me, that they tried to take away my self-esteem and my self-confidence. When I got out of school, I got a job running a Medicaid clinic, and I had to handle 5 chairs by myself. And that started to give me my confidence back, because I was very good at what I did. I graduated number 54 out of 126. So I wasn't a disgrace to the profession because I had a mustache. I was actually very good at what I did. But I didn't have confidence in myself because they beat me down so badly. So I agreed to meet with this dean, and he brings another dean with him. And they take me out to this beautiful place for lunch. And I start to tell him my story. And he interrupts me. I get just a few sentences. And this is not the dean who was there. This is the new dean, Dean Ismail, who's a great guy. And he interrupts me telling my story. And he says, I want you to know those guys were racist and anti-Semites. And they ruined the atmosphere of the whole school. And I said, I can't thank you enough for saying that. I never wanted to say it myself, but that was my feeling. He said, they treated you the worst, and I was aware of it. He said, they treated other people that way, but you got it the worst. And he said, at the end of our talk, he said to me, can I give you a hug? And I said, absolutely. And I made him take pictures with me. I sent it to you. I don't know if you saw it. It's a picture of me with 2 deans, one on either side of me. It's like, what doesn't fit in this picture, you know? And we wound up becoming friends, and he wound up having me do a series of lectures to the doctors at Temple, a series of weekly lectures. And one of them, he said, I want you to talk about changing hate to love, changing frustration to enjoyable, and changing hate to love. He said, because we've changed the entire environment of the school, and we would never allow anything like that to occur anymore. He's been there like 10 years, he said. And he said, I want you to come to the school, and I want you to tell your story to the students, because they need to hear your story, because they think they have it rough, and they don't know what it's like to really have it rough. And then the pandemic hit. And so I've only had to do everything online. But about a month from now, I'm supposed to go there to do a lunch and learn. So he had me do 5 lectures, one of them on my approach to TMJ and taking away headaches, just using energy. And then he hired me to do a comedy show for Christmas, which was amazing. And then he said to me, could you ever believe that this would happen in your life? That after what you went through, that the dean of the dental school would become a friend of yours? I said, I could never believe it in a million years. To me, it's an unbelievable story that you can never judge what's going to happen to you in your life. Mm-hmm. And it gave me a sense of closure. It never could take away all the pain. I'm still haunted by the things that they did to me. When you're tortured for 4 years straight and you're singled out and humiliated on a daily basis, when you're supposed to be treated like a doctor, it was a horrible thing, horrible thing. So I don't know if anybody out there who's listening can relate to this story. I almost hope they can't, but it was a terrible thing to undergo because I loved being a dentist. It was such a great choice for me, and I did it for so many years. And when I went to N.Y.U, that's where I had the opportunity to work with Michael Gelb, who was the head of the TMJ department. You know, when I went to dental school, I was in so much pain from stress. I thought I had lockjaw. I couldn't open my mouth in the morning. And they diagnosed me with TMJ. But in those days, they didn't treat it right. They treated it with occlusal equilibration, which made it worse because they took away all my contacts. So now I had nowhere to bite. I'm moving my jaw like a coke addict. I'm moving my jaw from left to right. I didn't know what to do. And some genius told me about a soft night guard for the lower teeth. And I've been doing that for decades. I made so many of them. And I have a book of letters of people that thought they had migraine headaches, whose headaches were cured from wearing a soft night guard on their lower teeth. I had a girl call me once from an emergency room. They were about to do a brain scan on her. The pain in her head was so bad that she was literally suicidal. And she thought to call me. And she said, someone asked me if I grind my teeth. Is it possible that I can have this pain because I'm not wearing my night guard? And I said, before you let them do any brain work, wear your night guard a couple of nights. And that was the problem. So I got to work on Michael Gelb. And, because he was interested. First, I got called to the head of oral medicine, called me into her office one day, a lovely woman who ran the oral medicine department. And I thought I was in trouble because whenever I get called to somebody's office, it flashed back to dental school. In dental school, if they called you doctor, you knew you had a problem. If they said, doctor, come up to the board, okay, now you're in for it. So she called me to her office, and I said, Joan, what's up? And she said, I think we're underutilizing you. She said, I think you should be teaching what you do in the school. Because I was teaching patients how to relax the muscles that are causing the musculoskeletal headaches that many people think are just regular migraine headaches. And I was working intraorally, and I was using chakra techniques and things that I've been doing basically all my life. And she said, we should raise money so that you could teach that at the school. And so I was shocked, but unfortunately it never happened. But she arranged for me to lecture to the whole faculty. And then Michael Gelb had me do one of my treatments on him because he said, I want to see what that's like. I want to feel it. And I did it on him. And then he arranged for me to speak to his postgraduate students. So that's something that I like to talk about. And that's what I'll be talking about when I talk to the Israeli people, because after the last 3 years, people are under so much stress. Patients are cracking teeth like crazy. People that dentists tell me they're seeing all kinds of signs, and too many people don't check for that. Very few dentists ask patients when they wake up in the morning if they have neck pain or shoulder pain. Mm-hmm. And most physicians don't have a clue, so they don't ask that. So it goes undiagnosed, and millions of people are walking around with headaches. And I think dentists should be treating headaches. That's me and the two deans, by the way. Can you tell which is which? We all look so similar. It's very hard.
One of these things is not like the other.
One of these things is not like the other. I want to hear this story, Jeff.
Yes.
Jeffrey.
Yeah,
I do too.
All right, cool. So in my junior year of dental school, I decided I have to meet Woody Allen. Woody Allen is my idol, right? In comedy. Not in his social life, whatever. Don't get confused about that. When he used to do stand-up, there was nobody funnier than Woody Allen. And people told me that I write like Woody Allen. So there were only 3 people I ever wanted to meet growing up: Woody Allen, Salvador Dali, and the Beach Boys. And I got to meet them all. I contrived this way to meet them. So I'm a junior in dental school. Woody is starring on Broadway in a show called Play It Again, Sam, with Tony Roberts. And I'm sending him notes backstage on my dental school cards, on the back of my dental school, on the back of my dental school appointment cards, as if I know him. And I'm writing notes like, every time I come into New York, I go to the theater and I leave a note backstage with the stage manager. Woody, it's Jeffrey. I haven't seen you in a long time. I can't wait to reconnect. And I was saying ridiculous things like I'm bringing my cardboard thumb with me. I thought I had to say strange things to him, right? And I didn't have money for tickets. I guess I eventually saved up money, but I was dropping these cards off on my dental school cards. So finally, I get enough money to buy tickets. And I knew that I had to impress him that I wasn't a maniac, because most men do not go to the theater hoping to meet other men. That's just a rule. So I had this idea: if you want to show someone you're sane, there's only 2 ways to do it. You either wear a tie or you bring a pretty girl with you. And I didn't have a tie, and I only knew one pretty girl, and she hated me because we just broke up. But she knew that my dream was to meet Woody Allen. So I begged her to come with me, and she said she agreed to come with me. So I get my father's car, and I'm driving her down. I had no money. I don't know how I got money for tickets. We drive to the theater, and I was so naive. I didn't know you wait till the end of the show. I tell Woody, my last dental school card, I said, Woody, we're here, and I'll be coming back during intermission. I don't know you don't interrupt people in intermission. I'm a kid. I'm like 24, right? So intermission comes, and I go into a panic. I'm too nervous. And she goes, you have to do this. I came with you. You can't back out. So we go to the stage door. There's no terrorism in those days, so there's no security. I open the stage door. The stage manager is not in his seat. So I take her hand and I run up these stairs, but they're the wrong stairs. I wind up on the roof. So I come back down, and the stage manager is there, and he says, can I help you? And I said, yes, Woody is expecting me. And he said, well, go right in. So I walk in, but Woody's dressing room is empty. He's in Tony Roberts' dressing room with the whole cast. Now I have to face the entire cast, and I'm really in a panic. And she says to me, you have to do this. You must do this. So I go up to the door, and I can see this like it was yesterday. Woody Allen is sitting on a couch across the room. And I look in the room, and I go like this to him, like to a little child. And he goes like this, me? To me? And I'm like, yes, you. And he comes over, and he's actually holding my dental school card. And he says to me, you must be Jeff. And at that, I totally lost it. I'm meeting my idol. I was overexcited. And I started saying ridiculous things like, let's open up a day camp and throw winter clothes at people. I said, let's walk low like we used to in Europe. And he looks at the girl next to me. I know you don't curse, but he looks at the girl and he goes, this guy's a fucking nut. I was totally losing it because I was so overexcited. So I quieted myself down, and I said to him, listen, I'm a comedy writer. I'm in dental school, but I'm a comedy writer. And everyone says that I write stuff like you, and I was hoping that you'd look at my material. And he says to me, well, look, I'm right in the middle of a show. You're in intermission. He goes, do you think you could come back tomorrow? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm much too busy. No, of course I didn't. Of course I'll come tomorrow. Yeah. I beg the same girl because I have zero self-esteem, and I always think it's about who's on my arm. I don't realize they're inviting me. No one says you can only come if you have a beautiful girl with you, but I don't know that, right? So I beg her to come with me again, and this time he sits with me for an hour, and I bring all my comedy notes. I don't even think I had scripts. They were scraps of paper in an envelope, and he sits with me in his dressing room, and he reads all my stuff, and he goes, this is very visual, man. You should really think of making a film out of it, which I wound up doing. I created a film called The Men Who series for the Toyota Comedy Festival, and it was about men who do very unusual things, like men who take a pitchfork to the movies, men who enjoy Latin dancing with tools. I'm sure you've seen a lot of Latin dancing with tools, but I had a guy who did the tango with a wrench that was unbelievable. And one of them, I did a special. It was called prominent businessmen who wear swim fins to the office. And I got a prominent oral surgeon named Joel Friedman, who you may know because he was an officer in some big dental group. Joel Friedman made believe he was a cardiac surgeon. And we snuck into Einstein Hospital at night as a surgical team. And I interrupt him during the surgery, not knowing that it's always been his dream to be on TV. And at the time, I was on a show called The Dizzy Izzy Show. So I bust into the operating room while he's operating on a heart patient. And I'm like, "Are you Dr. Friedman?" He goes, "Yeah, is this for television?" And he walks away during the surgery, and he's wearing huge swim fins. And he gives me this great interview about why it's important to him to wear swim fins in the operating room. That only he and Dr. Steiglitz in Austria wear these special swim fins, because when you're operating for 10 or 12 hours, it really takes the pressure off your feet. And meanwhile, his surgical team is screaming, "Dr. Friedman, there's no blood pressure and no pulse. No blood pressure, no pulse." But he's so into the interview, he can't stop because it's his dream to be on TV. So I did all that stuff, right? So I make this film, and then Saturday Night Live comes out, right? And I'm like, I need to be on Saturday Night Live. I got to get connected to these people. So in the meantime, I'm driving a pimp mobile. This is the car I bought. I needed to buy a car. It was the first car I ever owned. And in those days, I had met a pimp from Maryland, and I was very impressed with his lifestyle. And his name was Benny, and he drove a gold Eldorado with all kinds of, like, it was. I never saw a car like that. It had a clear bubble over the driver's seat and a clear bubble over the passenger seat, like the Pope's car, right? And I'm like, this is the car I need. So I went to a place in the Bronx where there's no white people go there. So I bought this car. It was made for one of the Isley brothers, but they decided not to take it. And I got confirmation actually from the Isley brothers. So I bring the car home and I bought a Rolls Royce grill because that's what all the pimps had, a Rolls Royce grill. But my car has DDS plates. And my wife is like, "We're Jewish and we live in Scarsdale. Why am I driving an orange Cadillac?" She didn't get it. I had a CB radio in the shape of a telephone because there was no phones in those days, right? So I take those crazy films that I was making. Oh, and I made a whole bunch of them. A lot of them were false news items. Like one of them was like, several men would get arrested for smearing cream cheese on the ankles of elderly women who wore their stockings rolled down like bagels. You ever see the old women with the stockings on their ankles? It looks like bagels. Oh, yeah. So I got my dear grandmother to make believe she had a Jewish accent. I put cream cheese on her ankles. That's how sick I was. I put cream cheese on my own grandmother's ankles. And she said, "You know, in the Jewish religion, we have two kinds of stockings, one for milk and one for meat." She goes, and this crazy man, he smeared cream cheese on my meat stockings, and I can't get it off. And I zoom in with my Super 8 camera on the stockings. So I drive this car to Saturday Night Live. I said, I gotta break into this show. So wherever I drove this car, cops were following me, hookers were looking at me, drug addicts. Nobody saw a car with doctor's plates with a Rolls Royce grill like that, right? So I drive up to Saturday Night Live, and in those days, there's no terrorism. So you could drive right up to 30 Rock. That's the address of Saturday Night Live. And I drive up there. The doormen are outside. I throw the doormen a few bucks. I said, "Watch my car. Lorne Michaels is expecting me." Lorne Michaels never heard of me. No one ever heard of me. I was well known around my apartment at the time. So I get in and I sneak past the security. These days, if you try to do that, they shoot at you. But I sneak up to Saturday Night Live, and I don't know if you know the name Alan Zweibel, but he was one of the original head writers. He's become an award-winning producer, director. He's playing handball on the wall with Neil Levy, who's Lorne Michaels' cousin. He was a producer on the show. And I introduce myself and I tell him about these films. And he goes, "I got to see this." And he looks at the films, and he did one of the kindest things. He didn't just give me a phone number. He called his manager for me, who was at the time was managing Freddie Prinze. And he asked him if he would meet with me. and he was also handling the comics who worked on Catskills on Broadway. And that's how I got started writing, because of that crazy car, and because I had the balls to go to Saturday Night Live and tell Lorne Michaels that he already knew me. I wouldn't have the nerve to do any of those things in those days, but it worked. So it took me a year to learn how to start writing jokes, because I was writing cream cheese on the ankles, and you can't do that on stage. Those are sketches, you know?
Right, right.
Like Monty Python did The Ministry of Silly Walks.
Yeah.
I did a film before that called Men Who Walk Low for a Living and Enjoy It. And I filmed it in my dental office about a man with a very strange walk who came, he came to have his teeth fixed, but he walked like a spider. It was a very strange thing. And so I always try and incorporate dentistry in my comedy. In my book, Man Robs Bank with His Chin, I have a story called Dentist Accidentally Extracts Man's Face, because he had a tooth where his head swelled up so big that his face came loose. And when the doctor went to extract the tooth, he accidentally extracted his face. He tried to cement it on, but it didn't go on straight. And now the man is suing for loss of face. And so
he lost face.
So,
oh my gosh.
So this book is a what do you call it? The Weekly World News it was the precursor to the Onion, if you're familiar with the Onion.
Mm-hmm.
So my stories were so bizarre that they gave me my own column called Gurian's World of the Bizarre. And that led me to creating GNN, which is Gurian News Network, which is it's all the news that's fit to dance to. Like Jen, you do news, I do news also. My news is a little different than what your news was, but so look, I have quotes from Richard Lewis from Curb Your Enthusiasm. He said, "These hilarious stories and the author's longtime reputation as a top comedian makes you wonder why he isn't selling out clubs in North Korea." And then I got a quote from Colin Jost, the head of Saturday Night Live. You know, he does Weekend Update. Just married Scarlett Johansson, right? He says, "Ever since I met Jeffrey Gurian, good things started happening to me. Coincidence? Yes." And then Nick Kroll wrote, "Jeffrey Gurian asked me to write a blurb for his book, and this is it." So it's a book of very unusual stories, but that one I think you'd appreciate. The dentist accidentally extracts man's face.
That's amazing.
So that's how I got started writing comedy. And then in 1980, I started writing for Rodney, who was like the biggest star at the time that I had written for. And he started doing my stuff on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And then my name started to get out. And that's how I got the article in the New York Times. And then I started writing for Joan Rivers. And then for the Friars Club, I was the head writer for the Friars Roasts for 12 years. And you know how filthy they were. So I can't tell you any of those jokes because you'll all lose your offices if I do that.
You can once we hit end broadcast.
Yeah.
You'll lose your license if I tell those jokes. But I got to write for every big star. Bruce Willis, you know, Jerry Lewis. I got to work with the greats of yesteryear. Ron Bennington said that I'm the only guy he knows who got to work with the greats of yesteryear. If you remember the name Milton Berle.
Of course.
Yeah, Uncle Milty.
Yeah, Uncle Milty. Milton Berle was my sponsor in the Friars Club.
Wow.
And he used to love to talk to me about his teeth. He spent a fortune on implants. And we'd sit in the Friars Club and he'd be asking me questions about his teeth. And I'd say, "Send me the x-rays so I can look at them," you know? And so I got to write for him and Jerry Lewis, and I work with Sid Caesar and all the guys from the golden age. And now I get to work with all the young guys like Kroll and Mulaney and Bill Burr and Chris Stefano and Kevin Hart. I wound up producing Kevin Hart, you know, one of the biggest stars. I did a benefit for Haiti, and Kevin was the star. And I called Chris Rock. I did a book with Chris Rock, Make 'em Laugh, about the history of the comedy club where he was discovered by Eddie Murphy. My partner owned the comic strip, who just passed away about a year ago, Richie Tinkin, who managed Eddie Murphy for the first 11 years of his career and discovered Chris Rock. He managed Adam Sandler. He managed Colin Quinn. He was a real heavyweight in comedy. And so that's who, I never wanted to look like a novelty. And if you're a dentist and you think you're in comedy, I knew I needed to work with very famous people. So I didn't look like a joke. I never wanted people not to take me seriously because I was a very serious cosmetic dentist and I was a very serious comedy writer. I didn't want to look like, on the Ed Sullivan Show, they used to have plate spinners and a knife throwing act. I didn't want to look like a knife throwing act. I wanted to be taken very seriously. So I didn't used to tell people about my day job. And then
you could play the music while you were doing dentistry.
That's very true. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Joan Rivers, I had been writing for her. I thought she knew that I was a dentist because she met me at the Friars Club and she had her assistant call and ask if I would write for her because she liked the jokes that I was writing at the roast. And she invited me to her home. And most comedians didn't invite writers to come to their home. She lived in this beautiful palace, like on 61st and 5th Avenue. So I thought if she's inviting me to her home, she's treating me like a doctor. She must know that I'm a doctor. So I show up at her house, and her doorman says to me, "You'll have to wait a few minutes. Joan just sprained her ankle, and she's in a lot of pain." And I thought to myself, this is amazing. What a stroke of luck. I can write her a prescription for painkillers. No other comedy writer could do that, right? I'm like, she's gonna love me if I do that. I'll write her a prescription for painkillers, and then she'll hire me. So when I finally get up to her apartment, I realize that she doesn't know because there's other people there, and she introduces me to everyone as Mr. Gurian. So I'm like, okay. So a few months go by. I'm writing for her. We're getting along great. She's doing my material. She calls me early in the morning, and my nurse has strict instructions: never interrupt me when I'm with a patient unless it's for show business. So she would come into the room and she'd be like, "Dr. Rivers is on the phone. Dr. Lewis is calling." The only one nobody believed was Dr. Dangerfield. Nobody ever went back.
Yeah.
So I take the call, and Joan says to me, "What do you do during the day?" I'm like, I work. And she's in Vegas now, and it's early, right? It's on her mind. It's bothering her. So she said, "Well, obviously you work. What is it that you do?" So I knew she knew. So I'm like, "Is this concerning the vicious rumor going around that I'm a dentist?" I said, "Look, Joan, I've heard of accusing people of a lot of things, but that's really low." She loved it. She laughed. She goes, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Because in show business, no one hires you because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of the fact."
That's right.
That's right.
He goes, "Well,
Hey.
I love it." And so
Jeffrey.
we were very close, and so I could go on and on. I haven't given you a chance to ask me any questions.
No, Jeffrey, this has been the fastest
Perfect.
45 minutes, I think, ever on our show.
I do
because it's been so much fun. We obviously have to get you back on. We're actually overtime now.
Oh, you are? I'm sorry.
But before
No, don't be sorry. This has been great.
This is great. No, don't apologize. Yeah.
I conquered stuttering. I was a very severe stutterer. Even after dental school, I was blocking on words because they damaged me so badly. And I developed a cure for stuttering after working on myself for many years. And now I work with stutterers all over the world. And now that I stopped stuttering, you can't shut me up. I talk a lot. I have a lot to say. So I hope that, I'll just end with this, that if people are struggling with anything, these books have gotten amazing responses. They're all bestsellers on Amazon. The first one is called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. You know how hard it is to get a dog to sit in lotus position? It's almost impossible. And then I wrote Fight the Fear, which actually has a chapter called The Nightmare of Dental School, which a lot of people will enjoy. But it's about fighting fears in your life. Fear tries to hold you back. It's like a bully. And I conquer my fear all the time. I went to Japan by myself in 2019 because it was the scariest thing I could think of to do. And my last book that I wrote after I recovered from COVID is called Facing Adversity, Stories of Courage and Inspiration. And it's true stories that I collected over 20 years of people who overcame amazing difficulties, because I've always respected people who don't let life beat them down. We all have obstacles to face, and some people are crushed by them, and other people find the inner strength to overcome them. And I've always been so impressed. So I collected these stories over 20 years. Very quick. A little 3-year-old boy gets his hands cut off in a machine, and his father is a surgeon and sees it happen, but he's not that kind of surgeon. And he rushes him to the hospital, and it's a holiday, and there's no transplant surgeons. So the father has no choice but to try and implant the hands himself. And he assembles a team, and they work for 9 hours, and they put the little boy's hands back on. They put him in casts. And after 3 months, the hands are alive, but they're not functional. The grandfather is a martial arts specialist who trains that little boy every day growing up. And today, that little boy is a famous spinal surgeon, and he runs the spinal surgery clinic in a hospital in Colorado. And he's a black belt in martial arts. And those are the kind of stories that I wrote because they're so inspirational. It touched my heart when I read those. And I think people need to hear stories like that. So when I was lucky enough to recover from COVID, I wanted to spread that, because I believe that when you can overcome an obstacle, you're supposed to share it with other people to give them hope. And so I'll end on that. I'm sorry that we went long, but
no worry. We're gonna have you back for sure too, because this has been absolutely amazing. Gang, everyone out there, also be sure to check out his YouTube channel, Comedy Matters. And also he has
Comedy Matters TV. It's comedymatterstv.com.
TV, excuse me.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
And also he's got an upcoming program on Sunday, April 23rd at 8 o'clock. It's a laugh and learn where you can get some dental CE, maybe a couple of chuckles as well. So we'll actually follow up with you, Jeffrey. We'll get all the information so we can get it out to everybody who comes on our Facebook page and our YouTube listeners. And just want to say thank you so much for being with us. And we have so much more to talk about. And we just appreciate you taking the time out to hang out with us tonight.
I loved hanging out with you guys. Really, it's really fun.
What a treat.
It's very cathartic for me to talk to other dentists, because I really don't have that opportunity much. And it was very, very special for me. And if they do sign up for that thing, they get a free book. And if you guys are on Instagram, please follow me so we can stay in touch, and I'll follow you back. And I friended you on Facebook too, Jennifer and Jeff. I'm already connected to Chad. So I thank you. I had the best time. I have a million more stories. Anytime you want me to come back, I'm ready.
Well, I think we're going to close with laughter is the best medicine. I love your outlook on healing, on prayer, on happiness, on everything that you gave us tonight. I needed the laugh. I think everybody else did. It was amazing. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Yeah. You really made my day. I will be in touch with you via email. Underneath this post, it will be branded on our Facebook page. Please feel free to post any links that you'd like on this thread. And
post links to my books,
to your books, to your upcoming lecture. Thank you all very much, and we're going to have Jeffrey back. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thanks. You guys are amazing.
Have a good night.
Good night, Jen. Take care.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.